The flashing red and blue lights reflected off the still surface of the lake like an emergency beacon in the night, and for a split second, I thought maybe there'd been a car accident on the nearby county road. But as the engines roared closer and the beams of high-powered flashlights cut through the trees, I realized they were coming straight toward me. I was sitting in my fold-out camp chair right next to my campfire, roasting marshmallows with the easy confidence of a man enjoying his own land. This wasn't just any patch of dirt either, this was my ranch lake, a peaceful corner of my property that I'd worked years to purchase and protect. The shoreline was mine, the dock was mine, and the fishing rights were mine, all clearly written in black ink on county documents. So when a loud, commanding voice shouted, "Sir, step away from the property," I froze, not because I was scared, but because I couldn't wrap my head around the sheer absurdity of the command. My property? Step away. Out of the shadows, 2 police SUVs rolled into view, crunching over gravel like they were entering a crime scene. I could see the reflection of my firelight dancing off their windshields. Before I could even call out a hello, a man in a blazer came striding behind them, pointing at me like he'd just spotted a fugitive. His chest puffed out, his face twisted into a smirk that screamed self-importance. "That's him," he barked, loud enough for both officers to hear. "That's the man illegally camping on HOA-controlled lakefront property. I told you he'd still be here." Now, here's the kicker, this man wasn't some random stranger. No, he was the self-proclaimed president of the neighborhood HOA from a subdivision that sat a good 2 miles away from my ranch. I'd never signed their covenants, never joined their meetings, never paid a dime in their fees. My ranch wasn't even in their legal boundary lines. But clearly, this man thought he had authority here, and judging by the way the officers approached me, he'd spun them quite the story. I stood up slowly, brushing ashes and dust from my jeans, and locked eyes with him. "You sure you want to go down this road?" I asked evenly. My voice wasn't loud, but it carried weight. "Because I know exactly where it ends, and you're not going to like it." The closest officer adjusted his belt and took a step forward, his flashlight beam sweeping over my camp setup, the cooler, the tent, the folding table. "Sir, we've received multiple complaints from the Homeowners Association about unauthorized use of their lake facilities," he said in a tone that sounded more like procedure than personal opinion. I tilted my head. "Facilities? You mean my picnic table and dock?" I turned and pointed behind me at the weathered but sturdy benches I'd built with my own hands, the small grill I'd welded together from scrap steel, and the dock where my fishing boat bobbed gently in the water. All of it was part of my ranch's layout, paid for, built by me, maintained by me. The so-called HOA president stepped in front of the officer like he was leading the charge. "This shoreline is community property, part of our HOA's protected amenities. This man is not a member. We've warned him before, but he keeps coming back. I want him removed, tonight." His tone was smug, final, like he thought his word was law. But in that moment, something clicked for me. This wasn't a case of mistaken boundaries. This was deliberate. I'd had a run-in a few weeks earlier with some people fishing here. They claimed they had permission from their HOA to use the lake. I'd told them flat out this was private ranch land, and they'd left, grumbling. Now, here was their leader, escalating things by dragging in law enforcement. "You've made a big mistake," I said calmly, looking directly at the officer instead of the HOA guy. "This lake is well inside my property boundaries. I've got the deed in my truck, the survey maps, the water rights, everything. And I've already filed multiple trespassing complaints with the county against these people." The officer hesitated. His eyes shifted from me to the man in the blazer, then back again. "Do you have proof of ownership with you tonight?" I smiled, not because I was happy, but because this was about to get interesting. "Oh, I've got more than proof," I said. "I've got documentation that will make it real clear who's breaking the law here. And if that's not enough, I have the sheriff's personal cell number. Want me to call him now?" That landed like a rock in a pond. The HOA man's confident smirk wavered for the first time. The officer straightened, clearly realizing this wasn't going to be the quick, remove the trespasser, call they'd been expecting. I turned and walked to my truck, feeling their eyes on me, every step measured. Inside my glove box sat the manila folder I always kept for situations like this, a collection of documents that left no room for debate. I could already feel the shift coming, the moment where the truth would start unraveling their entire plan. The air felt thick as I reached into my truck's glove box and pulled out the manila folder. I could hear the crunch of boots behind me, the officers keeping a careful watch, and the HOA president hovering like he thought he'd caught me in some grand act of defiance. He had no idea he was about to be the one caught. I walked back slowly, holding the folder in one hand, taking my time like a man with nothing to hide. When I reached the hood of my truck, I laid the folder down and opened it, revealing neatly stacked papers, maps, and official stamps that glinted under the beam of the officer's flashlight. The younger officer leaned closer first, his brow furrowing as he scanned the top page, a county-recorded deed showing my name, the parcel number, and the legal description of the property. "This says the shoreline is part of your ranch," he murmured. I nodded. "Keep reading." Underneath was the official survey map, a big sheet of paper covered in precise lines and labels, the lake smack in the middle of my outlined boundaries. Then came the water rights documentation, dated and signed years ago, granting me exclusive use for recreation, irrigation, and fishing. Every single document had been verified and recorded at the county office. The older officer took the papers next. His flashlight beam lingered on each page. When he looked up at me, there was a different tone in his voice. "You're telling me these HOA folks have been using your lake without permission?" I let out a short, humorless laugh. "Not just using it, claiming it. I've seen their members bring boats, set up picnics, even hold birthday parties here. A few weeks back, I caught a group fishing. Told them they were on private land, and they claimed the HOA gave them access. I told them to leave. Looks like they didn't take it well." The HOA president stepped forward, waving a hand like he could brush off everything I'd just shown. "Those papers must be outdated. This lake has always been considered part of our community amenities. Our residents have used it for decades without issue. It's basically tradition." I turned my head slowly toward him. "Tradition?" My voice was calm, but it carried weight. "Trespassing isn't tradition. It's a crime. And you just admitted on record, in front of law enforcement, that your people have been doing it for years." That got the younger officer's attention. His eyes flicked to his partner, and I could tell the dynamic was shifting. The HOA president must have noticed too, because his voice got louder, more desperate. "You can't keep the community from the lake. It's not right." "It's not right?" I repeated. "What's not right is you trying to bully the rightful owner off his own land. What's not right is you calling the cops to enforce rules you don't have authority to make. And what's really not right is thinking you can steal use of someone else's property just because you've gotten away with it in the past." The older officer straightened, turning his attention fully to the HOA man. "Sir, based on what I'm seeing here, this property is not under your HOA's jurisdiction. If your members have been using it, that's trespassing. You don't have the authority to order the owner off his own land." The HOA president's face turned red, and for a moment, I thought he might explode. "This is ridiculous. You can't just..." The officer cut him off. "I suggest you stop right there before you say something you can't take back. You called us here claiming this man was on HOA-controlled property. The documents say otherwise. That's a serious misrepresentation." I folded my arms, letting the silence hang for a beat before adding, "By the way, officer, I've been keeping a log of every time I've found HOA members here without permission. Dates, times, photos, even license plates. I've already spoken to the county sheriff about pursuing charges if this continues. The younger officer whistled under his breath. Sounds like you've been more than patient. I have, I said, meeting the HOA president's glare. But patience runs out. And as of tonight, the HOA's lake privileges, imaginary or otherwise, are officially revoked. The older officer handed my papers back, his tone respectful now. Mister, you're well within your rights here. We're going to wrap this up. Then he turned to the HOA man. Sir, you and your members need to leave this property immediately. And I suggest you inform your board to stay off these premises in the future unless you have written permission from the owner, which, from what I'm hearing, isn't going to happen. The HOA president was practically shaking. You haven't heard the last of this, he spat, turning toward the tree line. I smiled faintly. I'm counting on it. The sheriff will want to hear it too. As the officers began walking back to their SUVs, I knew the tables had completely turned. The man who had marched in here thinking he could order me off my own land had just been told, in front of witnesses, that he was the trespasser. And I wasn't done with him yet. 5 minutes later, the manila folder was back in my truck, and the officers were standing with me on the shore, the night air heavy with tension. The campfire crackled behind us, throwing shadows across the lake, but the sound of the HOA president pacing like a caged animal was louder than the gentle lapping of the water. His expensive blazer caught the firelight as he spun around, searching for a way to regain control of a situation that had slipped completely out of his hands. The older officer cleared his throat. Mister, based on what we've seen, this property is not under HOA jurisdiction. The lake, the dock, and this shoreline are all on your deed. That's the end of it as far as we're concerned. The HOA president whipped his head toward him. You can't just dismiss decades of community use like that. We've held fishing tournaments here. 4th of July cookouts. My father even. Your father didn't own it either, I cut in, my voice sharper now. You and your neighbors have been trespassing for years, and you've been lucky I didn't take it further. But tonight you crossed a line. You called law enforcement on me, on the owner, and tried to have me arrested for camping on my own property. That's harassment. That's filing a false report. The younger officer, who had been quietly observing, stepped forward. Sir, he said to the HOA president, you need to understand something. You're not dealing with a neighbor dispute here. You've entered someone else's property without permission, and now you've involved law enforcement under false pretenses. That's not just bad form, it's potentially criminal. I could see the HOA president's hands ball into fists at his sides. He was used to his position of power in the subdivision, used to barking orders and having people bend to his will. But out here, in the middle of my ranch, none of his authority meant a thing. His little kingdom stopped where my fence line began, and tonight he was standing way past it. I've been lenient, I said, keeping my tone level but firm. I've ignored the occasional fishermen, the picnic groups, even the people who thought it was okay to drag their kayaks down here. But this ends now. Starting tonight, every member of your HOA is officially barred from setting foot on this property. I'll be sending the county a copy of this incident report as further evidence of your group's trespassing. The HOA president stepped toward me, his jaw tight. You think you can lock us out? You'll see how fast we take you to court. The older officer stepped between us, palm out. Sir, unless you can produce legal documentation that contradicts the deed we've reviewed, you don't have a case. I suggest you take your leave. I decided to twist the knife just a little. Oh, and by the way, I added, next week, a new fence goes up along the property line. 12 feet high in some places. Gates locked. Cameras installed. Your so-called community lake will be off limits for good. You might want to prepare your members for the bad news. The younger officer's lips twitched, like he was holding back a grin. The HOA president's face, on the other hand, looked like he'd bitten into a lemon. "You haven't heard the last of me," he hissed before turning sharply and stomping toward the road where his car was parked. "Good," I called after him. "Bring all the noise you want. The sheriff will love hearing the recording of tonight's little performance." The officers lingered a moment longer, asking me a few follow-up questions for their report. I made sure every detail was crystal clear: the history of trespassing, the previous warnings I'd given, the photographic evidence I'd taken over the years. They promised the incident would be documented thoroughly. When they finally drove off, the red and blue lights fading into the night, I stood alone on my shoreline, the firelight flickering against the dark water. The lake was quiet again. No shouting, no stomping, no false authority. Just the way it was meant to be. I poured myself a cup of coffee from the thermos sitting by my chair and took a slow sip, letting the warmth settle in. Tonight could have gone very differently if I hadn't been prepared. If I didn't keep my paperwork close, if I'd let anger get the better of me, the HOA president might have succeeded in twisting the story. But instead, he'd walked away exposed, humiliated, and powerless. And the best part? I wasn't finished yet. This was just the first step in shutting down their lake invasion for good. The next would make sure they never even thought about coming back. The next morning, I was up before sunrise, watching the mist rise off the lake as I sipped my coffee. The silence was perfect, no HOA members wandering in, no voices carrying across the water, no strange vehicles parked along the shore. But I knew that wouldn't last unless I acted fast. Last night had been a win, but I'd dealt with people like the HOA president before. They never just walk away. They regroup, plot, and come back louder. So today was about making sure there would never be a next time. By mid-morning, a fencing crew was unloading supplies at the property line. I'd called them before dawn and told them to bring enough posts and panels to wrap this entire lake like a fortress. We weren't just talking a simple wire fence. This was going to be steel posts sunk deep into concrete, heavy-duty chain link topped with barbed wire in the most vulnerable spots. I'd even ordered motion sensor security cameras and private property, no trespassing. Violators will be prosecuted, signs in bright red letters big enough to read from 50 yards away. As the crew worked, I took my ATV down the shoreline, marking exact spots on my GPS where I wanted gates installed. They'd be locked with heavy padlocks, the kind you couldn't just cut without attracting attention. The access points would be few, and every single one of them would have a camera watching. Around noon, I got a call from the county sheriff himself. I'd left him a voicemail the night before after the officers left. He'd already read their report and wasn't happy about what he saw. "They called my deputies out for nothing," he said, his voice low but sharp. "Told them you were trespassing when the paperwork says otherwise. That's not just bad behavior, that's a waste of police resources." "I figured you'd see it that way," I replied. "Oh, I see it," he said. "And I've already drafted letters to every single HOA member informing them that the lake is off limits. Anyone caught out there without your permission will face charges. I'm also adding that HOA president's name to our watch list for false reporting." I couldn't help but grin. That should make the next community meeting interesting. By late afternoon, word had clearly spread. A white SUV pulled up just outside the new fence line, and I spotted a couple of HOA members standing there, peering through the chain link like kids locked out of the playground. One of them pointed at the "No Trespassing" sign, shaking his head. The other spotted the security camera pointed right at them and quickly pulled him away. They didn't say a word to me, but the message was clear: they knew the game was over. 2 days later, I got confirmation from a neighbor who lived closer to the subdivision. The HOA had called an emergency meeting to discuss the loss of lake access. According to my neighbor, the president tried to spin it like I was the villain, but plenty of members were furious. Not at me, but at him. Some even accused him of lying about the lake belonging to the HOA all these years. I heard more than one family was talking about voting him out. That night, I set up my tent by the water again, not because I needed to, but because I could. The sky was clear, the stars reflecting off the surface of the lake like diamonds scattered across black glass. I built a fire, grilled some steaks, and listened to the peaceful sounds of my land. No interruptions, no arguments, no strangers stomping around like they owned the place. As I sat there, I thought about the HOA president's face when the officers told him the truth. That exact moment when all his bluster collapsed, when he realized he wasn't the one in control here. That image alone was worth every penny I'd ever spent defending this property. And here's the thing, people like him thrive on intimidation. They count on others not knowing their rights, not being prepared, not having the patience to push back. But the second you stand firm, the second you back them into a corner with facts and proof, all that fake authority crumbles. By the time I packed up my camp the next morning, I knew one thing for sure, this lake would never see another uninvited HOA community event again. The land was mine. The water was mine. And now, so was the peace that came with knowing no one could take it away. Because at the end of the day, there's nothing sweeter than enjoying what's yours, especially when you've defended it and won.